Hey, it's me, Rob Bryan. Welcome back to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. I say it all the time. I will say it again. One of the absolute pleasures and joys of my life is these conversations I get to have with people on every episode of our show. And this week's episode that you're going to listen to and enjoy is no different. I had the distinct pleasure of getting to learn from and listen to and be inspired by Michelle O'Grady Caballero, the CEO and founder of Team Friday, which is a cross-cultural marketing, public relations, communication strategy agency here in Los Angeles that does work all across the country, that does work across corporate brand sectors, government, public agencies, small businesses, individual community leaders and brands. Just an incredibly inspired conversation. I say it all the time. There's nothing like a conversation with a powerful, intelligent, confident, capable Latina. And that is this conversation with Michelle. So I hope you enjoy it as much as she and I did making it for you, because it is an episode in which you're not only going to learn a lot about how to better communicate and how to position the messaging for your organization, but you're also just going to be inspired about what's possible when we think long-term and we think and act curiously and intentionally in our lives. Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, the show where every week I get to talk to the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across every segment of society and industry today. And today's guest is no different. I'm super grateful to be joined by a friend of a friend, Michelle O'Grady Caballero, who's the founder and CEO of Team Friday. And I want to take a moment just to shout out the friend, because really, to me, in our humble little world where we produce the show for all of you listeners, there really is no greater compliment for us or for the show than when a former guest, in this case, our great friend Cuco Vega, tells me, like, aggressively, you have to interview this person. Like, I have to connect you two. You two should be friends. I need you to talk to this person. And so let me go ahead now and tell you a little bit about this person, Michelle. So Michelle is a dynamic leader here in Los Angeles. She's an entrepreneur and a storytelling strategist. Whether you're a government, corporate, nonprofit, or a community leader even, Michelle uses her team's deep experience to help you craft your uniquely compelling story in her work at Team Friday. Michelle uses her gifts for understanding others, as well as telling others stories, combined to craft innovative solutions to complex communications challenges for a wide range of organizations. She leverages her extensive experience in marketing, philanthropy, research, advocacy, and strategic partnership building to deeply understand the needs of both her clients and their communities. She leads with a sense of leaving communities and clients better than when she found them, and does so with a passion for creating a sense of belonging, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Michelle's impressive background includes not only all of this, which I've already described, but a master's in media psychology and roles on various boards throughout the community. This makes her insights even more invaluable beyond just the scope of her work, but she's really, really, really a catalyst here in our Los Angeles community and for the communities of the clients that she serves. So it's my honor and privilege on behalf of myself and Cuco Vega to welcome Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rob. I feel like I should hire you to just do my intros.
Okay, I'm both humbled and you will appreciate the funny story that this is a recurring theme. I'm getting a lot of this lately.
I think that's another side business. I'm talking about entrepreneurship. I think it's a side venture.
A woman you may know, you definitely know of her probably here in Los Angeles, Robin Ward, who does a lot of leadership coaching and investing, and is one of the original investors in Angel City football club. We had Robin on the show not too long ago for a future episode coming up in the next couple of weeks. And she said that after, she's like, can I just take you to every meeting that I go to?
Yeah, I think I'm just send me the check for that write-up.
So thank you very much. And it's, as I always say, it's fun, but it's also easy to say nice things about really good people. Right.
Oh, thank you.
And so everything I just said is basically your life's work. And so today we're just here to amplify it.
Yeah, it sounds crazier when you say it. but
it's just
good.
the podcaster voice. We all need a podcaster voice in our own head.
We do. I need to start practicing.
There you
but
go.
thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And
no, it's a pleasure.
Conversations. And Kuko, love, like, I feel like the minute I met him, he was like a brother. So I feel really honored to have been propped up by him.
The minute I met him, which was in November of 2016 in Guadalajara.
Oh, wow.
I
in his home turf.
At his university that he is an alumnus of. And you talk about brothers. This is what triggered the story. Is I met he and his brother.
Oh, that's cute.
and I mentored them as they were preparing for like a pitch contest kind of presentation thing.
That's awesome.
And I was just one of dozens of mentors in this like kind of bullpen area. And these two guys with this mustachioed like look come up to me.
It's so iconic.
Right. I mean, I as much as I'm happy to see him, and he'll love that we're talking this much about him at the top of the show, but as much as I love to see him so healthy and happy and like reinventing himself as he is right now in these last couple of years, I do kind of miss the like obviously iconic mustache.
I'm going to let him be on his own journey, but it's so, I tell him all the time, I'm like, it's so iconic.
Yes, no, exactly. So we're grateful. We're grateful that Kuko introduced us so we can have this conversation. You've got such a fascinating background that we will touch on, but frankly, it's just your work. I mean, my underlying curiosity, and I've got a first question that I'll drop here in a second, but just some background is my underlying curiosity really is the breadth and depth of clients that you deal with and that you represent and that you helped you and your team. Whenever I say you today, it's going to be your team.
Totally.
Right.
Don't do anything alone.
That you and your team help to tell their stories. To me, it's just incredible. Right. I mean, and so that's what we really want to dig into. So first things first, do you consider yourself a storyteller?
I think we're all storytellers. And so I find I always have this like internal struggle. I think it's just a Michelle struggle, not necessarily a team struggle, but of like labels overall. I think like everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has something, like inherent worth to bring to the table through their lived experience. And so we really find that like our job is really to how do we bring that inherent worth out? How do we tell that story that is going to allow for points of human connection and dot connection? We think we talk a lot about I think the reason why we've been so great at like moving through industries, and I've worked, my friends will affectionately say like, Michelle's had 9 career lives, like a cat, I've worked in fashion and lifestyle and all of these things, all of these different areas and consumer products to like now working, with one of the, not one of the biggest public health department in the country. Like our orientation and alignment is really like, how do we authentically connect? How do we authentically connect as people? And storytelling is just such that critical part of it. And whether you understand that you're a storyteller or not, everything is a story. Every kind of conversation, every touch point is another marker in that story. And the story evolves and it changes. And so, we're really careful about like, this is a story moment in this time, but that story will evolve. And like, how do we keep evolving it with communities and in order to invite more connection and more authenticity to be seen throughout and for you to be seen within the story and for you to like that's where the belonging happens and that's where the kind of points of connection happen.
I was gonna say I love that, and I know it's on the website. It's in some different stuff I've seen on social, like this dot connecting, right? Kind of approach. That's a fantastic kind of foundation, right? Is that we're all trying to connect these dots, either in our experiences or within our communities, et cetera. So that's awesome.
We're all trying to like inject, like we're all trying to connect with each other, and like that's just the human experience. And so, our job is really like, what's our role in the human experience is like one of those orientations, and then distilling it back to like industry and distilling it back and, getting really granular about like what's at the core of that connection. And storytelling is such a big part of that.
Yeah, No, 100% agree. And we will distill it into some of these more specific examples, and we'll talk about some of these different industries as we get into the conversation a little bit with some other questions that I have. But you just teased something in a word that you used that I want to ask you this next question, because the word stood out as I read through your background and your various materials I could find on socials and on the website and stuff like that. Like, the word kept jumping out to me as this idea of belonging, right? So you literally at one point in I think it might even been like in your LinkedIn profile, it says you've got extensive experience in belonging. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so two-part question. What does that mean to you? And then why is belonging so important to all of us?
Yeah, I mean, I think the psychologist in me will always say like belonging is so important because that's how we're seen and that's how we connect, right? And like you cannot connect into the human experience, you cannot connect into any sort of like entity, organization. You can't even buy into a brand if you don't feel points of connection and you don't feel like that certain experience is accessible to you. And so my approach to thinking about belonging, and I think about belonging in a couple of different ways. Like there's the identity that I hold just personally as like a mixed race, but mixed ethnicity person. There is the identity that I hold about like where I live in society, like socioeconomics and stuff like that. There's the positionality around culture and the larger culture, whether it's community culture, whether it's LA culture, whether it's global culture, whether it's Mexican culture, there's all
Yeah.
these different points of connection and the way I think about belonging. And so we really try to think about it. And my approach to belonging and approach to that psychology and like how it gets infused into our work is really like, how do you talk about wholeness of people? We like to think about our work as like cross cultural and not in the cross cultural, multicultural sense, but like,
Right.
how do we live? You are living in a city, especially something like LA County or any of the bigger cities that we work in, DC, New York, Chicago, everything from that to like, like I'm fascinated with what's happening in Kansas City right now, and I can totally talk about that. But I think we talk about the different dynamics of wholeness of community and like belonging in community first, and how do you show up as your full self, and then how do we enhance that experience through whatever we're doing to make sure that that belonging is infused as a part of that authentic storytelling. It's really around this alignment around wholeness and belonging as wholeness and being able to show up with yourself, your whole self, and dissect it. I don't live in the binary, personally, I try not to live in the binary of just like good or bad or this or that,
Sure.
because everything is so gray, and
Yeah.
our lived experiences, as traumatic or as great or and all of that in between, help shape like how we show up. And so I'm really fascinated by how people show up as a way to create more belonging in society. Like, how do we
Fascinating.
contribute to other people feeling seen as much as possible?
And taking this, like,
Mm-hmm.
deep-seated curiosity about other people and how people show up and how we belong with each other, or how people belong in their own, as you say, communities, and the broadest sense of the word community. But then helping the organizations, we'll just call them organizations, your clients, right? Like, because sometimes they're companies, sometimes they're government agencies,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole spectrum in between. But but then helping those organizations to understand those people, and
Mm-hmm.
then helping them craft their story to
Yeah.
fit with those people.
Yeah, I say we do 80% listening and 20% doing, like we are
Wow.
definitely like trying to think about how to not get it perfect, nothing ever is, but how to include as many people as possible, especially when you're thinking about like in our world of work right now, like we don't have like we have niche markets that fit within global conversations. And
Right.
so how are you in that kind of elasticity of where you can bring in people into the you can have a global conversation in a niche community is a really sometimes very sensitive topic. Like you're dealing with culture, you're dealing with language, you're dealing with everything from like literacy rates to like to
Right.
socioeconomics. Like you're bringing all of those factors in where it becomes much more than just the pretty advertisement that we end up with, but there's like a ton of conversations and a ton of like research, independent, we do a lot of ground truthing with community and like making sure that like, hey, this is what the researchers are saying. I'm a researcher. Like I have a master's. I'm about to go into my doctorate program in human development. And
Oh,
so, you know,
congratulations.
thank you. And so there is, like I think about it from like researchers get it wrong all the time. Like it's not
Yeah.
enough to look at the research. It's really important to bring in the community and make them feel like they're a part of the process and get that buy-in from the beginning and have those hard conversations where, especially government, which has not gotten it right so many times,
Right.
like to be able to kind of like hold and create that space. And we've been really fortunate with the clients that we work with that they really, it might take that approach takes a long time. And so, you have to get buy-in from it. And we've been really fortunate that a lot of our clients are like, yeah, we want to do the hard work now so that
Okay.
later on future campaigns are so much more fruitful and so much more engaged
Sure.
with and have that necessity of complexity with them already.
That's great. That's always obviously as any provider of any kind of level of professional service, right? It's always great when the client gets buy-in
Oh,
early on in the
100%. Yeah.
early on in the process, right? So I want to I want to kind of alter a question that I had intended to ask, but pull on this the same thing that you were just talking about here is so let's just use Los Angeles as an example, right? So I would even argue not necessarily even just like, hey, as you say, oftentimes or sometimes government doesn't get it right, right? But even when they do get it right, like just
Mm-hmm.
the day to day work of whether it's the city of Los Angeles as government agencies or the government itself as a client or the county in our case, like the city, a lot of people don't know this about Los Angeles other than just know it's a big city, right? It would be the 17th largest economy in the world if it were a country, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
essentially, Mayor Bass is running a pretty significantly sized country, right? Or the
The
county
city.
supervisors,
Yeah. The county.
right?
Yeah. The county supervisor.
Just in the, like, so forget the whole like California would be a country,
Yeah.
like everybody knows that, but just the
Yeah.
city itself, right? So even when you get something right, bear with me a second as I extrapolate this, even as that client gets some messaging or some programming or some policy decision right, it might not necessarily be right for everybody
100%.
because
Like
that's almost impossible to do, right? So in that environment, then
yeah.
help me understand, how do you guys then help that client, that agency, to lead, to craft with as much of a trustworthy, genuine message as is possible, while still accepting that neither you can't help them nor can they produce a message that's literally going to satisfy every constituent.
Yeah. I mean, I think that gets involved, we do campaigns within campaigns within campaigns, right? Like,
Okay,
like
there
the
you go.
level, like there, it's like a nesting doll. Like, like we'll plant, like we'll have one campaign and then we'll be like, okay, cool. Like, let's modify it to match the needs of this community and then match the needs of this community and match the needs of this community. And I think there's a lot of required coordination, like it's like an orchestra of conversations that have to happen at the same time. And a lot of community leaders are really great about figuring out how to like hold messages together within each other. And
Okay.
we've had such an amazing time working with different cohorts of leadership within the city and the county of just how do we have these complex conversations where sometimes communities might be in conflict with each other around messaging style or even messaging approach, and how
Yeah.
do we work together to kind of show like a unified front. And like so we've done a lot of like cohort building work and collaborative work across multiple sectors, faith-based community organizations or like every like like
Could be
we're
neighborhood
launching a
community
huge, yeah,
groups, could
neighborhood
be
community councils, like,
different interests, et cetera,
yeah,
different
and
interest
different
groups.
interests and different level of wants of interference too. And I
Yeah.
think like that scope of that has allowed us to kind of like scale programs and programmatic
Interesting.
marketing and in different ways of just like, oh, this community doesn't really need it. Like, let's put resources and like work with on communities that really need this messaging or really need this or not getting these resources, right? A lot of it is like who has resources to like who just doesn't want to hear the message and has the
Okay.
resources to do it, and here
Yeah.
who doesn't have the resources and is not hearing the message. And that we usually
Interesting.
solve for the most impacted but least aware. And like
Okay.
that's usually where we start from, and then we build from there, because you're not going to be able to convince everybody. No brand, no organization is ever going to be able to get total buy-in from a community. Like, we just don't
Sure.
live in that ethno state. Thank God.
Right.
I think it's a great
Yeah.
thing. I think
Right.
it's a
No,
great
yeah.
thing to have diverse opinions and conversations. And so, but I think we like, there's a lot of nesting that
No,
happens
I love
around
that
like
metaphor, this
communities.
idea. So part of what I'm hearing is not only are we literally like almost like a director, producer would, showrunner would, like, we're literally like coming in with you, we're listening, and then we're helping you kind of
Craft
script
it.
and
We're happy.
craft. Not only that are we crafting the
We're
story,
the
but I'm
kind of
also
technical
hearing, to use
assistance is how I
your
think
Russian
about it.
nesting doll analogy, like you're also teaching them you're teaching your clients how to play the game, how to understand the rules of the nesting doll. Like, so
Yeah.
you're literally you're helping them put together the entire story, but then you're literally helping them understand how to pull each piece of it out and deploy it into the community in very targeted ways. That's fascinating
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
must be hugely valuable to your clients.
I mean, yeah, like I think, yeah, we've had clients for a long time,
That's great. That's awesome.
multi-year. So I think
No,
they've
that's
been valuable. I haven't really gotten, that's a reminder. I should get updated testimonials, but
hey, there we go. Happy to have triggered that for you today. That's my
yeah,
value
yeah,
proposition for today. So no,
yeah, I,
and in a minute we'll talk, and because I want you to have the full chance to talk about Team Friday. We'll get to that in a second.
yeah,
On this thread, but it's kind of a different question is, you're younger than I am, so I'll say you're a young woman, in all her power, though. But you've been at this for a while. You're about to become a doctor of this, right? Which is
yeah.
incredible. But so tell me, what is different or new about kind of the marketing, public relations, creative storytelling world or business today in a 2024 post-pandemic world that is different than maybe how we told business or organizational marketing stories 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
Oof. I mean, I think there's a lot of movement in the industry right now. There's a lot of consolidation happening. And so it's really interesting to me, I think, about how we think about diversity of thought, and I think diversity of thought is really important in this conversation around how stories are being told. And we're seeing this across industries, right? Like Hollywood is consolidating, and I think we can debate the good, the bad, the ugly around that. But 80% of the media exported, 80% of media and I talk media in like the larger sense,
Sure.
in like the technology media to the Hollywood media to the brand creative media, the agency media is exported around the world. And so I would say argue that it's like one of our number one exports as an American country. And so I think I think how we think about media and how we think about the storytelling and where the industry is kind of like going in that is really around like, how do we make sure that there's enough diversity of thought so that
Okay.
there's
It's big.
multiple storytelling happening and people, and this goes back to the belonging question, right? Like everybody has a story. And so how are we kind of like telling everybody's story in a non-homogenous way, even when societal and culture will actively ask us to fit within a trend or fit within a box, or, and social media has like supercharge this kind of endeavor and idea, whereas before it was like brands really could have like way more distinction in their conversations online, and way more distinction in how they thought about things. It's, we kind of, I worry that like with the having media so readily available in its totality, that we're not actually having very kind of diverse conversations around what that media
Right.
totality looks like.
Ironically, right? Like
Yeah,
we fragmented
we
out to all the
fragmented.
audiences, but yet then everything that we curate authentically is basically super generic and the same.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like the diversity of that is really around like how are brands dot connecting across, like, everything is political essentially, like your money is political, like how you spend your time is political, and all of that stuff. So I think,
Yeah.
we've been thinking about how all of those things dot connect for a really long time, and not just cross culturally, but like cross cultural of industry, cross cultural of, like policy making, like we work with the government. So like they have a very political agenda sometimes, and, and we sit in the culture space. So like, how do those kind of like those often competing conversations happen? And how do we use our expertise to kind of like bring in that conversation as much as possible?
Yeah. So I think this is a perfect time. Let's tell our audience a little bit about Team Friday and kind of how you got here. Right? Like let's
Oh man.
this so we'll do this in two parts. First part, give us the commercial about Team Friday, what you guys do, who you work with, et cetera, et cetera. And then second part, when you're comfortable, like share with us kind of, how did you bring all your relationship development experience, your career, your policy advocacy work at Google? Like how did you decide to take the entrepreneurial leap and build Team Friday? But first things first, what is Team Friday?
Yeah. Team Friday is a cross-cultural creative marketing, insert advertising slash hyphen agency. And we work on developing cross-cultural campaigns that, we take really complex solutions, or, complex ideas and programmatic marketing. And then we, like create some solutions. We're not necessarily like an agent AOR. Like we're not a big agency. We're not trying to be a big agency. We really like looking at what is the complexity of culture, and where does it fit, and then solving for that problem and creating moments for brands and opportunities and organizations to scale that,
I
like
love that.
within their larger organization, so yeah, so I think like, and we've done that really well, and it allows us to be really nimble and kind of and keep us humble, because we're constantly learning and trying and failing and, doing all of those things together with our clients. And so yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
like
you're
what
like
we do.
online. Sorry for interrupting. Online, like
Yeah,
it's a pretty small, nimble team,
yeah.
and yet you work with like you scroll just kind of the role of company logos and client logos, and you're working with some, as you said, like biggest departments of health in the country, government agencies for huge cities or municipalities, big
Yeah,
brands, big corporate brands, big companies, big retail chains, like. I mean, how do all you do this?
I think we stretch time. I think as
You figured out the
entrepreneurs,
secret.
I know. I think as entrepreneurs, you just stretch time, as much as possible. But I do think like, because we're working with teams, usually small, nimble, teams within these companies, organizations, government
Okay.
agencies that want to try something different. And
Yeah.
so we get to be nimble together and like really propose big things, propose big changes from a
And
small,
then
nimble
come
way, and
alongside
then
them and help them
come
execute
alongside
it.
them, help them execute it, help
Yeah.
them bring in the strategy, and then help them scale that in so that becomes a part of the core ether of the company and organization. And then we exit, like, or we start the new project, or
Yeah.
here's a new thing to investigate and uncover and think about, and then do that. Like, what's the story? What's the narrative? and what's the true authenticity conversation that needs to happen. And a lot of, sometimes it's hard to say that you got something wrong, or it's even hard to say that like you've done something wrong in the past and you're trying something new. But we found that like even with that, with coaching through that authenticity, that like the fruitfulness of those conversations and the fruitfulness of the campaigns just get that much better.
Yeah. Do you before we talk about how you decided to become a crazy entrepreneur and bang time, but let's go back. Do you have like an amazing case study or a great client story from the last couple of years where you're really proud of some work that you guys did with them?
Yeah, I mean, oh my God. I mean, well,
that you can share, obviously. Like if it's private stuff, that's fine. But do you have one you can share?
No, I mean, like, I think like, when, we were working with Whole Foods and they were going to re-expand, like re-engage community in their stores. Like we designed like, a dinner series with like food advocates, like food access advocates and food bloggers, and brought them all together to kind of talk about these like food, food justice and food equity related conversations in which Whole Foods could support that because they're, and this is like pre-Amazon. So like, when Amazon bought that hostile takeover, my husband,
they might need to be working with you again.
Now. Yeah.
They might need to rehome the message again.
They definitely need some support. But those conversations were really fruitful, and it ended up being that, LA County was starting to pioneer cottage food manufacturers. Like, so that means like people that were making food in their home for sale and stuff like that. And that parlayed into like actual distribution within Whole Foods stores. So like that, from like doing a concept of like, how do we just bring you back into the community space, turned into like actually economic power, like an economic mobility angle for some of the attendees. And so we love constantly doing stuff like that. I think with like, spaces like the LA County Department of Public Health, it's like we did all these listening sessions, and we created a concept called like office hours. And this was like when the height of COVID, when community orgs were doing all the on the ground work, trying to reach the hardest to reach communities. And we were like, what do you need? Like, let's just create a space for you to come back, tell us how the marketing and the messaging is landing in community, and then we'll pivot and pivot and pivot. And that concept of like office hours has actually like now resonated throughout the county, and there's other departments that are taking that on. So I think, we still work with the department pretty closely, and, you'll probably see a bunch of billboards around gun lock and gun safety and, gun awareness, MPOX, like all of this stuff. We've run a lot of their media campaigns. And we've done all of that design with community members at the table. So we're designing and developing the campaign, with them as they're a part of it. And so I think like those types of areas are where we really thrive. Like we're not going to
those are two amazing, but kind of diverse, unique types of projects. Those are great examples, right? I mean, public health engagement with the community from a public health policy standpoint, accessibility to resources, knowledge, information, education, et cetera, for a massive city, county, or organization, right? And then a big corporate brand that everybody recognizes. And even in that example, right now, we could joke like post Amazon acquisition, Whole Foods legitimately might be time to start figuring out how to reconnect with their community again, because their owner has kind of changed their perceived status in the marketplace. So
totally.
Thank you for that. Those are awesome examples. It's funny, as a selfish example here, we don't know each other super well, but like if you ever see me on social media, like I'm definitely not the typical podcaster in LA. Like I don't own a car. I walk everywhere. I live in dead central New York, Times Square, Hollywood. And I take public transit. And I do all of this very intentionally. And so I bring that up to highlight how I probably see some of your team's work.
Oh, 100%. You have seen it.
Right. versus our peers who just pass by it in a car and they're never going to engage with it. right?
Right.
So I'm probably literally coming across some of the output that comes from your team and your work with different organizations in our community, which is really awesome, because I'm always fascinated by, like, how did they craft that message for this subway car right now? Like, who is it that's on this? And I just, my weird, curious business junkie brain is always kind of like, I wonder who came up with that, right? Like, to
Yeah.
talk to this constituency of people that I'm surrounded by, which is the most diverse. Like I always say, a subway car in LA, but any city, one single subway car is maybe the most diverse like collection of human beings available in society,
100%.
right?
Yeah. I learned that. I mean, when I lived in New York, I got a full education on what that looks like. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of Los Angeles still doesn't know. Like, we live in a car bubble. I'm born
Yep.
and raised in LA.
Yep.
And you could avoid like, you can literally avoid all parts of the city, and thus different conversations that you would have about that part
Right.
of the city and different communities
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. When I lived in New York, I was like, oh my God, like, I need to do, when I go back home, when I move back home, like, I have to be more intentional about not living in that car bubble, like, not really making sure that I'm engaged in the way that New York is so intrinsically done. Like, you have billionaires on the subway, and then you have everybody else,
Yep.
and everybody kind of uses a subway car to get around, and there's no qualms about it, there's no questions about anything. And I think
Right.
LA, for all the good, the bad, and the ugly of LA. And the beautiful part is that we are kind of investing in that experience, and
Yeah.
trying to connect more communities. And it's
Hugely.
been really, really, with, unfortunately, some unfortunate stuff is happening in Los Angeles,
Oh,
but
of course.
that happens
Yeah.
everywhere, and I think
Literally everywhere.
literally everywhere.
Yes. No,
But
I love your perspective. And by the way, I'm a firm believer that the truth of what is being invested in and programs and infrastructure development in our city, and how it will connect our communities. Like, because LA, as I often say, as a born and raised Chicago guy, LA is as much a neighborhood city as Chicago is.
Oh,
If
100%. Yeah.
it's just not,
The
not
city of
known, or
neighborhoods.
yeah, it's just not marketed or known that way, right?
Yeah.
But it is. But I suspect over the next 20 to 50 years that all of this work is going to lead to a ton of work for Team Friday,
Yeah.
right? Because they're going to need you to help them articulate these messages. So
crossing fingers.
let's assume you're going to be around for a long time as this crazy time bending entrepreneur. When did you decide to take the crazy leap of entrepreneurship? When did you decide to give birth to Team Friday, and why?
Yeah. I mean, my entrepreneurial journey I always say it's interesting. Like, I fell into it. I think I had a lot of naivete. I didn't know what I didn't know. I had been working, which I feel like, Jose Feliciano said, you have to have, like, blind faith that it's going to work out. And I think I've had blind faith for the last dozen years. I still feel like we're always in growth and startup mode. And I think that keeps us fresh and hungry and thinking about the future. I never think like, oh, we've made it, or anything like that. But I think my journey really stems from, I was working in culture, lifestyle, entertainment, and all of these different things. And I was working on a lot of multicultural initiatives. And I really was just trying to think, I had come back from New York. And so all this brain power around socioeconomics and how are we integrating people, like, more ethically? How are we thinking about our messaging and our marketing and our influence, and all of the consumer behavior research that we work with to, like, actually help people make better decisions, not just the decisions that we want, to buy a car or to buy this new bag or anything like that. But, like, what is our ethical responsibility as marketers to think about that in ways, and how can I take all this corporate marketing experience that I have and really transform, like, what conversation do I really want to have, and what do I want my mark to be left as? So I want
That's
my mark
wonderful.
to be left as like, somebody who I could sell anything to anyone. I've been doing it for a really long time.
Right.
but is that what I want? And more importantly, is that what I want to give back to my community as an entrepreneur, as with the skill set that I have around storytelling and dot connecting? Am I using that skill set for good?
Yeah.
And so really had like a hard look at like what I was working on, and as beautiful as those campaigns were and those clients, and as glamorous as it looked, I really had an internal struggle with just the ethics around it. And that led me to think about like, how could I take all this corporate knowledge? How can I take about all this consumer behavior knowledge that I know, and how do I repurpose it to like work on stuff and make things better, not sell stuff necessarily to everybody, but how do I like take that and like be able to like position messages that are actually needed, and be able to work on things that felt a little bit more purpose driven, honestly.
Good for you.
And so didn't know what I didn't know, and just was like, I'm just gonna start something.
So, good for you.
Yeah.
And how old is the firm?
So we'll be 12 in November.
Okay. So again, you've been doing this for a while.
I've been doing it for a while now. Yeah. And so, I think the goal was always to get to year 5, because then that's the determination. You've been a successful small business. I was like, okay, it's 5. And then it was 6, and then it was 7. I was like, how are we? Oh my God, we're going to be 12. I've been doing this for 12 years.
That's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And so that's, it's just been fun to kind of like think through and find team members that have that alignment, like want to do good, want to take their crafts and their skills and their, like nothing I do is independent of a team, like independently without my team. And
of course,
I really am like so grateful that I found other people to join this kind of like altruistic mission to like figure out how we can like help our clients, put good work out into the world, and be sources of truth, for some of those ethical conversations.
It's terrific. I've said for decades, like doing good is good business.
Yeah,
right? I think, so good for you.
Yeah, and I think I worked in fashion, I worked in coffee, I worked in experiential, I worked in like I've seen a lot of the marketing industry in its totality, and a lot of different industries in the world, and they're not bad by any means. I think for me it was just like a personal decision around, especially around multicultural and around like what are we selling and to who, and are we selling, and are we using products to manufacture belonging versus actually creating them to be a part of their belonging story in American culture. And I think that was the gripe that I had. And I was like, I really just want to help people understand their role and the complexity that they can hold as being a part of that.
Yeah, it's one of those, right? Like you move beyond I hear you say, like you move beyond the simple baseline transactional nature of the use of storytelling or selling or salesmanship, et cetera. But the truth is probably is with a client organization, right? 80 or some percentage, 80-90% of the message or the product that they're building, the program or the service, whatever, is basically built, right? And then it's this extra 10 or 20% that most organizations or companies, brands will just lazily just kind of push through to the transaction just so we can sell a lot of it. And the truth is, I've learned this over my career. You obviously are expert in it. The truth is, like, man, if you had just let us help you, we could have helped you with that last 10% and then essentially created like the best possible version of that product.
Like and the best possible version of the product that will have be able to be scaled beyond that,
and truly add value to your community and truly help your community educate, improve itself, be healthier, be like whatever the output is that they're looking for, right? But most organizations will just lazily kind of like top off the product with like whatever, right? And then push it out to the market, and because they're looking at like how many butts in seats, how many people in the community, how many people showed up for how many people got inoculated, how many whatever, right? They're just looking at the baseline transactional metric measurement. And you're like, yeah, like we're not asking you to not do that. We're just going to do that, but with like a better layer on top of it that makes it truly scalably, sustainably impactful. Yeah, which is better for your business, by the way, right?
Well, I think it's the patient investment for the long-term connection. A lot of, like when we're talking about transaction, it's like we need the transaction now, we need to sell this right now. And it's like, how do you think about how are you connecting this dot, but then connecting the 17 dots that can come after that?
That's beautifully said.
And we really think about like, I'm a very big, like, future forward thinker. Like, okay, cool. Like, this is the project right now. And let me tell you how it's going to scale into your business and how you can reimagine even your business offerings or this to match this potential scale. Like,
Good for you.
and I think like that's been a superpower that I've been honing into for a long time. And something that I think about. And, I had a mentor growing up that used to tell me that, like, don't read just the trades, read everything, like read what's happening and like connect it back, like do 20 minutes a day where you connect it back to the trade. So like you might be in marketing, but
wow,
like,
thank you, mentor. That's a great mentor.
Yeah, totally. And it's I'm always trying to tell, coach the team to be like, you got to think about like, what is happening over here and how does it connect back? Because that can bring you the ideas to have the 17 points in the future, where
real life, real life is context. I always
totally,
say, right?
totally. And some of our clients just don't have the time. They're so busy. It's not that they couldn't do this themselves. 100%. Like they can do what we do. That's why they hire us, so that we can do that for them,
Yeah.
So
it's incredible. Again, congratulations. Because as you say, building any kind of small business is hard. We've all experienced that, but to sustainably build it and have it grow as it has, 12 years and I feel like you're just getting started. I feel like I feel like I can feel your energy and your intellect is thinking so many layers forward, right? You may uniquely appreciate this anecdote. I get this a lot. I often say when people ask me about just about anything, but in particular, let's just talk about our shared geography here in Los Angeles, right? And I'll use that phrase online, long LA, and people occasionally ask me what I mean, and I'm basically like what this place will look like and how it should function 50 to 100 years from now. And people will call me out and laugh and go like, dude, you just turned 56. Like you're not even going to be alive for most of the bottom half of that range, right? Like you're going to be dead by the time we get to the 50 part, let alone the 100. Like, first of all, why do you care? Like, and secondly, like, why do you think like that? And I'm like, well, one, I care. And I think like that is basically the same answer, right? Because the whole simplicity of life is, as I said about you in the beginning, right? Like in my case, it was my mom who always said, like, leave every room or leave every relationship or conversation a little bit better off than you found it, right? So to me, the whole point is, yes, I would love, and I will enjoy like Los Angeles city, county, the region, the state, like the country progressing while I'm alive. I was like, but the true meaningful, sustainable progress is the stuff that's going to happen like over the next 3-4 generations. 100%. Right. And I think about that stuff. And then I try in my own little ways. Like it sounds like your agency, you do individually in your life, and then your agency does, and then your clients do as a result of your work with them and your guidance. But like we're trying to do our little part to keep ripple that, throw the stone in the water and have that ripple flow out well beyond our lifetimes.
100%. I always, especially as I get into my doctorate work, I have friends who are like, why would you want, why are you doing this? And I think, for the level of research that I want to do on like Generation Alpha and other, mixed race identities and all of these conversations, it's not really about like what will happen in my lifetime, but like what can this research kind of do beyond me. And I think I had such an amazing childhood growing up with my great grandmother who, like would literally give loans out from her dining room table to people that couldn't get small business loans because they were unbankable, like Outwater Village was, my family's been there for over 100 years. And
Your abuela was a fintech before
Yeah,
fintech was cool.
she was like old school with a receipt book, and I never understood why people were like coming to the house at like random days to like drop off flowers or cookies or
Right.
something for her. She was definitely like such a big fixture, but I think she knew that a resilient community and the resiliency of the ripple effect of like using her what she was granted in terms of opportunity and success and using that. And she did that without speaking English and without driving. So you
Mm.
guys both had that in common. I used to take the bus with her all the time. But
I
I
love
think
that.
I tried to like kind of push this calling aside for as long as I could
Sure, of
until it was
course.
so loud that I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing to the community? What am I doing in the world? Like, what can I control in my little nest of things that I can control? And hopefully that will have a positive effect. And all I can do is do the best work, and try to harm the least amount of people in the process.
Yeah, good for you. That's awesome. And we need 1,000 more Michelle O'Grady Caballeros. So, all right. So you tapped on a little bit, and I want to give you the chance to talk about it because we talked a little bit about it pre-show, it's just a powerfully important message to share. But you're not just a wildly diverse, professionally experienced person, right? You don't just have a sensitivity for community and belonging and an intuitive ear for other cultures. Like you yourself are a mixed bag of culture, right? Like you yourself bring to just your looking in the mirror every day a series of questions and realities, and it seems like from everything that you've just shared with us, which has been just incredible, it seems like you have really, or you are really coming into your own to apply like who you are as a Latina woman of a multicultural background and your own family roots and story, to apply that and bring it out into the world every day. So I would imagine, and this is not like the salesy question, it's just the authentic leader, CEO, entrepreneur question, is like you then being part of Team Friday bring that, right? So that means Team Friday is bringing that to its client relationships, right? Which now means Team Friday is inherently, and this isn't like oh, we're better than that. It's not about that, right? You're just inherently different. You're inherently, you bring a different set of values to your relationships of the projects that you work on. Like, how do you sit in that? How do you center that on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I can't help myself but like orient around the difference and the complexity every day, right? Like I'm Mexican and Irish. A lot of people, I mean, I'm a white presenting woman, so a lot of people do not inherently think that I'm Latina, but I grew up, my dad is Mexican and Irish, my mom is Mexican. My sister affectionately calls our last name like witness protection. Um, and then I'm married to a first gen Salvadorian, and that's where the Caballero comes in. I think about the complexity of like mixedness and the complexity of just being Latina and being officially mixed, even though there's Latinas that are, if you go to Mexico, you go to Latin countries, like you are that thing, and then the race mixality comes into play.
Yeah,
And I think in America, it's a different, unique experience because America does
agreed.
not like to have complexity. We love homogenous and putting people in boxes. And so my whole childhood was like butting the box, right? Like I call it like
Mm,
literally inching my way out of the box or stretching the box or, figuring out ways to think about the box differently. And I think that's just the orientation. And I think, I struggled with it as a kid because I was never white enough for white people. I'm never Latina enough for Latinas. Like I never fit the traditional profile that comes in American culture.
sure.
But I also think like we're in a stage of the world where we're forcing ourselves and there's a lot of culture pushing around the complexities. Generation Alpha, which is this next generation to come into teenage years. So it's 2010 to 2025, like kids born, 80% of them will be mixed race or mixed ethnicity. So we haven't solved for that complexity. We don't even have the language for it. I always talk about. But me, I think having that experience and remembering childhood, it's like I also want to make sure that our clients are solving or like thinking about that before they become actual adults that can participate in the economy,
Right.
in their way. So I think, I'm leaning into that unique perspective and leaning into the diversity of our team, and really talking about how we, even in our team, we're all in a community together. And so how do we even think about that orientation around our diverseness as a team to bring that orientation to how we solve those problems? And so I
That's
think that's
terrific.
been like such a beautiful kind of process for me to even develop and lean in and kind of work with my own therapist around my own identity questions,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
and really kind
all
of think about
intermingled at
it
this point,
more
right?
as
This is the
not
tapestry
something to
that
solve
is
for, but
this
something
is
to celebrate and really kind of like hone into these
yeah.
conversations and find the community of people that are going to accept the complexity and complexity with me. And those clients who really want to lean into the complexity as to learn and solve that problem where they may not be addressing it inherently, but they don't want to get flat footed, in the terms of creating more belonging in their ethos or for their customers or their brand experiences or anything like that. And so it's been really fun to kind of like work with some of our clients and be like, we can't just do something that's multicultural. We need to do things cross culturally, and we need to think about these things of like, how do all these races and ethnicities live together rather than we're going to just talk to them. And there's moments to just talk to certain communities. I'm not saying that, but we don't live in silos. So even if you're talking to one community, you're really talking to a broader audience.
No, it's totally true. It's incredible. Thank you. It's both a very insightful and very specific, but also beautiful description of not just who you are, but how you see yourself and then intentionally activate yourself on a daily basis to belong into all these different places that you are a part of, which is really awesome. The good news on the end of the story of the struggle, right, is I'll say what I say to my daughter. She's just turned 30. She's a up and coming writer and television writer in Hollywood, and so she fights that fight, right, like you're talking about. And I always tell her, I'm like, hey, the good news is, honey, like your world is coming. I was
Yeah,
like, you're like,
totally.
so, like
It's
your world
already
is
here. It's already
right. It's
here.
already here.
And it's already
Exactly.
been
Right.
here. Like this is not
Right.
an
You
like
just
I am not an
you
anomaly. We are not
no
anomalies.
women like you are yeah, women like you are just are just on the front edges
Yeah.
of what is already here. And but the good news is this next 50 to 100 years is your time. Like this is your time, which is that, hey, as the middle-aged, static white dude from the Midwest, I'm like, I am fan number one. Like, go, go, go.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. It's a really interesting time. All right, so we're in our last segment, last question. I love this is where we're going to tap your big, huge, talented brain. And if people are kind enough and interested enough to listen to this, they're going to get a little like 2 minutes of free advice from you, right? So I'd love to turn this kind of tactical, practical answer for hypothetical organizations that might be listening, right? So what are 2 or 3 practical steps that organizations could take to create more inclusive and engaging communication that resonate with diverse communities?
I think one, talk to them and not just talk to them, talk with them, like really be authentically engaged in the communities that you're trying to serve and you're trying to help solve problems for. I think there's so much more insight and compensate them for that conversation. I think we talk a
Okay.
lot about communities and perpetuating economic harm, especially when we're talking about multicultural communities or cross-cultural communities that may not have had the economic or there's still gigantic generational wealth or economic wealth gaps. And so we talk a lot about compensation, like make sure that you're paying people for their time
I
and
love
all of
that.
that stuff, especially when we're engaging with people. I think the other thing is think about your industry and then think about the 7 other industries that connect to your industry and what does that look like to what is the song and dance? And when you can deconstruct that, then you understand the levels of possibility that the world can open up in terms of partnerships or organizational communications or even advertisement. I think a lot of times, like, we get so siloed and in that fragments, we're so fragmented. It's like, we really like encourage our clients to like really think about the totality in which what they're offering and figure out ways to kind of like be creative in that process. And of course, we're here to help anybody who's interested in that.
Yeah.
But I think like just, in terms of like that mentor that I had, I always so encourage everybody to like use their superpowers to dot connect, like figure out what the connections, because everything in this world is connected. And if we remember that, then we're already orienting our decision making, orienting the way that we do messages with a broader scope. Even when they're narrow, we're like, okay, this message is going to fit for this community, but how would it resonate in another community? Or how can I activate in another community? Or how can I like fuse these partnerships together? And not just like the way we think about traditional partnerships, but even in conversation. And so just totally encourage people to be curious, like stay curious about where you are and how the world works, because the more curious you are about how the world works and the more you understand it, the better you can create that kind of storytelling moment, and create and connect that authentically, where it doesn't feel like a trend. You're not like hopping onto a conversation that you've never been a part of. I think about this a lot in terms of like what we saw in 2020, and there's been tons written around the investment and the fusion of capital in Black and brown communities post that movement, and then now what has dissipated because it didn't meet a business objective. Right. And I think we're narrow minded in how we think about business objectives, and what is and this comes into that kind of like 17 step, that long LA game is like, that investment isn't about the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. That investment is about the next 50 years. And to really approach problems about how are you connecting the investment you're making in a 1 to 3 year capacity. We talk about this a lot in the foundation space and philanthropy space, but how is that investment gonna, like, you have to play the longer game. Like, we have to get there as society, as like a culture, as, if we're going to have longevity in democracy or any other sort of totality, like you have to play the long game, and you have to be patient with the change. And so
amen
patience,
Sister Michelle,
curiosity, dot connecting. Those are my three advice.
Terrific. No, that's it. I mean, it's super insightful. I mean, that's a consulting session right there in itself at the end. So thank you so much for that. I got to say, rarely do the people that I call friends go wrong. And in this case, Cuco did not go wrong. Cuco, right? Exactly. 100%. Muchas gracias, mi amigo. This was awesome. You're you. That's the best thing. Like you have it. And I'm now glad that I've learned more about you. I'm glad that I've shared and amplified some of your perspectives and your insights and your energy, your infectious energy. And this was just a joyful conversation for me, selfishly. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and super excited about this conversation and future conversations to be had.
Yeah, no. We're now you're stuck with me. Yeah. Now we actually have to become like real friends and just hang out and try and make the world a little bit better. All right. So before we close, how can people find or follow you if you would like them to, or how can we find the firm and connect with the firm? Because we want to help people connect to you and connect to the firm.
Yeah, the firm is Team Friday, teamfriday.la, or we're on Team Friday LA on all the social channels, LinkedIn, etc. You can find me on LinkedIn, Michelle O'Grady Caballero, or Twitter, O'Grady-Michelle. Like, feel free to DM me or shoot me an email. Team Friday, Michelle at teamfriday.la. But totally welcome feedback and comments and opportunities to partner and all of the things.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Rob.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. You know, we can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, like, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.